Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Apologies, we're a little bit late. Technology is not my friend; it never has been. But we are here, and we're doing well, doing better this time. So today we are here to talk about the 5 steps that your business needs to go through in order to manage stress in your logistics operation. My name's Paddy. I am a logistics consultant. Before that, I worked as a transport planner and a transport supervisor in a variety of different industries. I've worked in general haulage, in events logistics, and in waste management. And as I say, for the past couple of years, I've been working as a logistics consultant, helping some of the bigger brands sort out their own logistics problems. I have been experiencing my own mental health challenges for pretty much as long as I can remember. And those challenges include anxiety, depression, and things like that. Just before COVID started, I had a situation where I had a driver come to my desk and hand in his resignation. He was 6 days into his very first driving job, that I know he'd wanted for a very long time. But 6 days in, he had had enough. That was it. He was ready to pack it all in and quit, basically. And the reason for that was because it wasn't what he expected. He had started a job which meant that he was away from home. He was under a lot of pressure from the business and under a lot of pressure from his manager, his trainer, things like that. And so me as his planner, I was the one he felt like he could talk to. Now, I managed to talk him out of it, but it kind of speaks to the difficulties that we have in the industry around actually what is a very high pressure job to deliver. Well, in this case, we're working in waste management, so it's more of a removal and delivery. High volumes under a lot of pressure, no time to do it in, lots of legislative issues to get in the way and things like that. So for me, that was very much a pivotal moment to decide to make a change, to try and do something better. You'll have to excuse me. I am recovering from COVID at the moment. I think I'm still testing positive. I've been for about 7 or 8 days at this point, but I'm past the worst of it. So we shall soldier on. So let's share some slides. Ooh, I've lost me. I don't see myself anymore. That's annoying. There we go. Oh. So, my steps that all logistics managers need to know to manage stress in their operation throughout the year. And the reason we talk about throughout the year is because obviously our businesses and our industry goes through those big peaks and troughs all throughout the year. We have big peak before Christmas as we are all slap bang in the middle of it and really going through that big final push to get us over the line onto the next thing. Then we go quiet, and then obviously ups and downs. And so what we need to do is manage the peaks, but also the troughs. Manage it, the other side of stress that's brought on by just being quiet, just by being less busy and things like that. When we start to manage that sort of thing, we actually start to make a real big difference. So, question 1, why on earth should we care about it? What causes stress, and why on earth should we care about it? Well, stress in and of itself is a normal body reaction. It is a perfectly normal biochemical reaction to pressure. If you feel under pressure, your body will feel stressed. So all sorts of things happening, pushing out hormones and chemicals within your body that give you a couple of things. In the short term, stress develops what we call the fight, flight, or freeze response, i.e., when we were, from an evolutionary perspective, when we were dealing with hunting things and our lives were in very big danger, and say you were hunting a woolly mammoth and turned around and tried to get you instead, your fight, flight, or freeze response would protect you. All the blood rushes to your muscles to give you the opportunity to have a decent chance of fighting, running away, or it will make you freeze so that whatever is chasing you thinks you're no longer a threat. That's the theory anyway. In the modern world, that's less useful to us most of the time because we're not, generally speaking, battling great woolly mammoths or anything like that. There obviously are some roles where that is the case, but not so much in logistics, I would argue. When that draws out over a longer period of time, that's when we start to see things like fatigue and burnout. If somebody's constantly pushing all the time, constantly under pressure, constantly under stress, because their fight or flight gives you a high heart rate, it gives you loads of adrenaline, things like that, then what ends up happening is they develop burnout because it's exhausting to try and keep that sort of thing going on. And stress not only is a physical response, it is also emotional and psychological. It has a big impact on everything that you do. So why should we care about it? Obviously, it's unpleasant, but fundamentally, it's what we would describe as a gateway illness. Every single mental health problem out there is worsened by stress. Some of them are caused by stress, but they are all worsened by it. And a lot of physical illnesses are worsened or caused by stress as well. And so clearly, if we can get in on the ground floor and deal with stress at a basic level, we can start making a big difference to people's health and happiness. It's not just a fad. It is something that actually we really need to be consciously aware of all the time so that we can cope with it at every step of the way, and therefore stop people from getting ill. Just a quick view on this. So this is it's officially described. It's officially called the Yerkes-Dodson law, and that is an indication of how pressure impacts performance. So, as you can see from this, where's my laser pointer? Where's my laser pointer? There it is. Along the bottom here is the amount of pressure, and on the side is the performance. So realistically, we need to be at a mid-level of pressure and a reasonable amount of pressure. You need people to have a reason to get up and to get doing stuff and things like that. Often people think that actually what we need is a low level of pressure, lower stress, so that we are in a good place. But actually, as you can see here, productivity and performance collapses if there is not enough pressure. People get bored. If we find ourselves in the middle area, we're in what we call high motivation, peak performance. People want to do a good job. They want to be involved. They want to get up and do stuff. When that pushes past, we start hitting into things like fatigue, exhaustion, ill health, and breakdown. And these areas are what we call burnout. So an increased amount of pressure over an extended period of time develops burnout. What we need to be aware of is that this pressure isn't just from the workplace. It's also from home. It's also from things outside the home. So it can be just from coming to and from work. It can be money issues. It can be all sorts of things. It can be bullying, harassment, all sorts of things put pressure on someone. So we need to be really aware of that. Now, mental health is kind of our bigger topic here. And what we need to just be aware of, just so that we're really clued in on what we're looking at and how we're going to fix this and how we're going to solve this, is what we actually classify as mental health. So in simple terms, mental health is a balance. It's a balance of three things. emotional well-being, psychological well-being, and social well-being. So it is a balance of how we feel, our emotions. Surely we recognize that somebody who is permanently sad has got a problem, but we also need to recognize that someone who is too happy might have a problem. Someone who cannot control their emotions, because clearly everybody goes through a period where they are sad, everybody goes through periods where they're happy or they're angry, all of those sorts of things. People with good emotional well-being can regulate those things. A temporary loss of that ability isn't unusual. We would expect that with things like grief, for example. You just feel down for extended periods of time because you've lost a loved one. That is very normal, but it's temporary. We expect that that resolves itself eventually. It takes some people a few days, takes some people a few months. It's very variable. Psychologically refers to how we think. How do we perceive the world? How do we make decisions? People with poor psychological well-being sometimes see things that aren't there, or they hear things that aren't there. They make decisions that don't seem rational or logical. Let them sit. So clearly, that's not appropriate. It's not what we want, particularly, for example, from somebody driving a lorry or operating a forklift truck. We need to know that they are making the right decisions, seeing what's actually there, and making the correct judgments. It's not uncommon for that to lose that temporarily. For example, people who are overtired or exhausted may see things that aren't there. They may think that a switch is flipped when it's not, or they may think that you said something that you didn't. And lastly, is socially. How do we behave? How do we interact with people around us? How do we talk to other people? How do we make relationships? This is important because actually, as human beings, we're very social creatures. We're very social creatures. We've got everything we do involves a communication with someone else, whether that's over text or email, Facebook, Messenger, whatever. Sometimes it's over Zoom, things like this. But sometimes it's just one of those things where we're just talking. So what we need to do is make sure that people are able to communicate properly. And what we often find is that people within the industry feel isolated. They feel socially disconnected from people around them. They feel socially disconnected from their colleagues, from their family. And that can be to do with the long working hours we have, some of the conditions we have to work in. That's very normal. It's not healthy, but it's normal. We also know that going back round the cycle, that people feel overworked, particularly at this time of year. We are 5 days from Christmas, and so we are in the big push. We really are. And so people will feel overworked. They will have loads on their plate, and they will feel like they are constantly working to get it done. And lastly, when you feel isolated and you feel overworked, it is not unusual to feel undervalued. We know this when you look at things such as the RHA's campaign to improve drivers' facilities. You can see why someone might feel undervalued. We've seen people really struggle with drivers being parked in the wrong place. We've seen warehouse workers struggle to keep up with things. And actually, when you start measuring them by KPI and reducing that down to a number, that can be really difficult for people. So as an industry, we know that we have pressures on people that are causing them to feel stressed. We know this, and we know that it's just part of the industry. So, have you tried to fix this before? Why didn't it work? What mistakes are we as an industry making? So maybe you've tried employing mental health first aiders, you've gone through the training course, the 2-day training course or the 1-day training course or whatever, and you've got your group of 10, 12, 15, whatever mental health first aiders at work. Doesn't seem to make a difference. I have had at least 3 or 4 clients contact me to say, we've spent £20,000 training mental health first aiders and it's made no difference. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to come forward, and therefore it feels like a waste of money. Maybe you tried doing awareness days. You know, the 10th of October is Time to Talk Day. Maybe that's one of the things you've tried to encourage people that they should be able to talk and they can talk. But why hasn't that lasted? Maybe you've dedicated a small section of your workplace to being a quiet space, specifically for people to be able to go and to sit and reflect and be quiet, or to have first aid or mental health first aid or whatever. But maybe these spaces aren't being used properly. Maybe they're not being used at all, and eventually they just go back to what they were before, a storeroom or something like that. You've encouraged people to talk. I have been in previous workplaces, I have been in the situation where something has happened and a toolbox talk has come out and we've all been told, don't worry, you can talk to me. But nobody does. The problem still exists. You are still experiencing stress in the work environment. People are still going off sick when you need them to be there, and they're not talking to you, even though you've said that they can talk to you. And when they do talk, do you know what to say? Maybe you've tried an employee assistance program. If you don't know what that is, essentially, usually it comes with some health insurance for the business, but essentially it is phone counselling. You have a phone number that people can ring and say, I work for company XYZ Limited, and I would like some counselling, please. Has that worked? Maybe. Maybe not. Do people use it? And when they do use it, do they get the benefit of it? The mistakes, or rather the problems, this slide's possibly misnamed, but the problems that we find are the same for businesses as they are for people. Do people actually want help? Do they know what they want? Do they know what good looks like? Do they know why you want to help them? Do they know why you're saying these things? If they don't want to help. There's a very well-known adage in mental health, which is you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. If somebody doesn't want to be helped, no matter what help you give them, it will not work. It just won't. You don't actually know what the problem is. Do they know what the problem is? Yes, you've said you can come and talk to me, and yes, we're having these mental health awareness days, but do you know why? You know, people come out, and I often get people tell me, well, yes, but my guys are just pulling out the stress card. They just want to say, oh, I'm feeling too stressed, I can't do that. But what does that mean? What does that even mean? You've got these systems in place. You've got your mental health first aiders. You've got your EAP, but they're not being used, and therefore they're not working properly. But why is that? And when that happens, people tend to rely on someone or something else. Again, one of the things I hear a lot is, but it's not my job. It's HR's job to manage engagement. And that's just not true. We know about mental health and therefore about stress generally, that actually it's not something that can be fixed by one person. It is something that takes a cultural shift within a business. It is something that takes everyone working towards the same goal, because when everybody's working towards the same goal, it gets better. When you have people working in different ways for different things, it doesn't help. And lastly, when you do come up with these things and you think you've nailed it, you've hit the nail on the head, the solutions don't last. They're not there forever. They don't excuse me. They don't seem to stick. And so 6 months later, we're having the same conversation again. Peak starts, and we're having the same conversation again and again and again. So this is the bit that we're all here for, the 5 steps. How do we break this really complicated and difficult problem down into something more manageable? The first thing we do is we look at the mistakes that we've just talked about. And when we identify the mistakes, and I've identified them by canvassing and surveying dozens of businesses around the UK, dozens of logistics businesses and businesses with logistics functions in them to try and figure this out. And this is what I've come up with. Step 1 is we need to think about buy-in. People worry that management are up to something. So what we need to do is make sure they don't. We need to stop that rumour mill. So first things first, why do we want to do this? What are we looking to achieve? And we need to make sure people know that. We need to make sure that people know what we're after, know what we're trying to do. We need to get them on side. So we need to figure out who is important, who are we trying to help, and who is likely to help us help them, and who is likely to hinder us, who's likely to get in the way, who's likely to have a problem with this. The next step, we need to think about awareness. We need to know what is happening, and we need to know why it's happening. So there are two sides to this. The first is data. You need to know how many people are using your EAP? How many people are going to mental health first aiders? You don't need to know what they're saying. You don't need to know what their issues are. You need to know how many people are using these things. You need to know how many people are taking sick days. And in those days, how many are related to mental health or stress? How many are just the bog standard sick days? In logistics, in the wider workforce in the UK, on average, people take around 4 to 5 days off sick per year, according to the Health and Safety Executive. In logistics, that's transportation, storage and warehousing, that number is 11.5. We have more than double, almost 3 times the sickness and absence rate of any other industry in the country, well, of the general of the workforce on average. We clearly have a problem. You need to figure out how big that problem is in your business. And then there's the why. Numbers tell you a lot. Numbers do tell you a lot, but they don't tell you everything. Human beings are complicated and they're fuzzy and they're foggy and they're weird. We need to figure out exactly what is driving this problem. Then we're going to start building systems. You need to start thinking about what you need. You need to use the data and the information you've got from your awareness and the buy-in that you've got from the first stage to figure out how to solve these problems on an ongoing basis. So some of the solutions off the shelf will be fine. Some of them will work. Some of them won't. So you need to figure out, what training do you need? What policies do you need in place? What systems do you need? What processes are important? And then once we've done that, developing an action plan, developing a step-by-step guide that says what you need to do, when and why and how. That is something actually that HSE requires you to have. As a business owner, along with your risk assessments and things like that for all your physical health and safety, you need risk assessments for your mental health and safety. It's important. Remember, we talked about how people think it's someone else's job. It's HR's job to manage engagement. It's not. It's yours, and it's theirs, and it's everyone's. So we need to find a way to make people take the bull by the horns and take responsibility. So the systems that we develop, that you develop, need to be second nature. They need to be easy to follow. They need to be so simple and so intuitive that you're just going to do it. You need to make sure that they work, make sure everybody knows what to do, when to do it. And the acid test is when you are deep in the middle of peak, does it still work? Do people still use those systems, or do they just go back to their old ways? Do they go back to their habits? And then last, but very much not least, in fact, probably most important, is continuing the good work. We need to make sure it keeps going. It's not about mini interventions and reactionary problem solving. It needs to be permanent. The changes need to be permanent, and they need to be intuitive, and they need to be simple. Everybody needs to take responsibility for this, because mental and physical well-being is as much about environment as anything else. It's so important that everyone's on board and that it becomes part of the culture, because when it does, it works. So, simply put, that's our 5-stage process. We have developed the basic method: buy-in, awareness, systems, integration, and continuation. We run this as a course, as a program for logistics leaders, and we involve everyone in the business. It's a 4-month course that we run 3 times in a year. So when you sign up with us, you get a year to work with us so that we can figure out all the kinks and fix them. You get access to an e-learning portal, you get access to various professionals of HR and psychotherapy, things like that. You'll get incentives to help you out. We do webinars, we do live in-person events, and we run multiple cohorts a year. So when you are doing the work, you will be alongside other people of the same industry. And so it gives you a networking opportunity to figure these things out. One of the things that people are kind of interested in is, why on earth is this important? Why on earth should you care? Why on earth should you go through the effort and the expense of doing it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that when we look at the challenges that the industry is facing moving forward, one of the big ones is around recruitment. The workforce as a generally is aging, and they are nearing retirement age. What we need to do is start thinking about refilling the pipe at the other end. And the simple fact is, young people coming into the industry have choices. They have choices and they have expectations. We need to change the way that we behave as an industry to welcome these people, to bring them on board, and to make sure that they are welcomed into the industry. We do that, the industry will flourish. Your business will flourish. The other side of this is about this time last year, actually. So December 2021, I was called to a client for my as a consultant, and they are a multi-million-pound, nationally recognised business. You will see their outlets on the high street all the time, and you've probably eaten their food. And they were facing down the barrel of a massive problem. They had about 60 drivers, or they were supposed to have about 60 drivers on their staff, and they were down to 45. And they kept leaving. They'd offered them more money, but they kept leaving. And they could not figure it out. They couldn't figure it out at all. So they called us in and said, figure this out. What is the problem? Talk to the drivers, figure it out. And honestly, we spent several weeks looking at it, turning over every stone and going through everything. And what we found was that the drivers didn't feel like they were being underpaid. They liked the work, but the thing that was pushing them out the door, and I mean pushing them out the door, was their manager. They had a supervisor who made them feel rubbish, who made them feel worthless. And when that started to happen, they went elsewhere. They accepted jobs that, at the time, this was at the point where drivers were being offered 1,500 quid or so sign-on bonus. So the decision was really easy for them. They would leave, they'd go do something else, and then they'd move, and then they'd move, and then they'd move. They were miserable, but at least they didn't have to deal with him. Once we identified that that was the major problem, everything started getting better. But because of the stress that one individual was causing, that business was staring down the barrel of a multi-million-pound supply chain issue as their main trunking operation collapsed. Well, it didn't quite collapse, but it nearly collapsed. That's why it's important. You look after everyone in your business, they will look after your business. So what's next? If this is something you're interested in, if this is something that makes you go, oh, actually, do you know what? I think we might need to deal with this. Great. You can contact us. We can help deal with these problems. First thing to do is go to our website. It's macbrant.co.uk. On there's a cost of mental health calculator. Simple thing. It's got some statistics in there about the industry as a whole. You can change them if you want to, but it allows you to see what the impact of this problem is on your business. You can check out our LinkedIn and our blog and our Instagram at The Mind Guy for most of those things. If you're here, you've seen our LinkedIn anyway. And then you can book a one-to-one discovery call with me. We can go into it in a bit more detail, figure out exactly what's going on in your business, and make a plan moving forward if that's something you're interested in. Or we can just talk for an hour. I don't mind. But again, that is at our website, macbrant.co.uk/book online. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. If you have got any questions, my email address is paddy@macbrant.co.uk. By all means, carry on. I need to stop talking now because COVID. But like I said, if you have any further questions, anything else you want to go through, please drop me an email. I'll be more than happy to help you. So thank you all so much for joining, and I will speak to you later.